This is Hog Farmer Chris from the Hog Farmers Charitable Foundation. And before you start listening to Red Zone in the Lab, check out our Amazon Smile, a simple way to support the Hog Farmers Charitable Foundation every time you shop, and it's no cost to you.
We're back! Welcome back to Red Zone in the Lab with Deuce.
Welcome to a brand new season of the Red Zone in the Lab podcast, where nothing is off the table. We will be discussing entrepreneurship, education, Black history, health, movies, family, and of course, sports. So do yourself a favor, make sure you like, subscribe, and follow on all social media platforms, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And of course, you can always visit us at redzoneinTheLab.com.
Welcome back to Red Zone in the Lab podcast. I am Deuce, and we are in October, the middle of October. We have begun our fall run of football, the best football weather. I love this weather. I love October weather. Today is Wednesday, and today we are joined again by NFL Analyst 106.7, the fan host, also host of Take Command podcast. This is Logan Paulsen. How you doing today, Logan?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Have it going well with you?
Yeah, everything been good, man. I mean, my football team ain't been going so good. But other than that, everything's been
you and
good.
Me both, man. You and me both.
Man, it's just been something with this team, and all, you know, when you're losing, like, everything is magnified, right? Everything is magnified, and it kind of seemed like it's been so much drama and so much just stuff in Ashburn. And it kind of started that Eagles game when that report came out, you know, about Carson Wentz, and he wasn't the first guy and run. And ever since then, it's like every game day or the day before game day, something happens. And the last 2 weeks has just been, oh man, it's been crazy. I know it's been crazy for Ron. He kind of let loose after the Chicago game. All the stuff that's been kind of building up, but it's been so much, Logan. But again, you're on here to kind of talk about Taylor Heinicke, but I do just want to ask you questions about outside distractions and things that's going on now. And I know, like, with the RG3 things, like 2013 and different things that you experienced, how does the players how are they able to focus on just football when it's so much outside drama?
That's a good question. I think fans and you know, watchers of football need to understand that, like, that's my job. That my job is to play football. My job is to be good at football. And if I'm not good at football, I'm not going to be on the team. So that's something that I always found was very focusing, right? Like, what is my main focus of being here? Do I care? Does Mike Shanahan and Dan Snyder fighting affect my ability to play football? No, it shouldn't, because really I'm putting out an audition tape every time I play a game for all 32 teams in the NFL. And that was my approach, and that was my mindset. I'm sure, you know, like older guys more familiar with ownership and Mike and all that stuff had some different thoughts about it. But that was something that I always went back to as a player and said, you know, I'm here to play football. This is a distraction from my goal of being the best football player I can be. And that was something that always kind of put the blinders on for me a little bit and kept me in a good spot mentally.
Yeah, and I know you're a high school coach, right? You coach high school football. Like, and you have a little bit. I mean, you're around the coaches. You know, you're around the facility. You're around the players. How does that affect the coaches? Because it's a more of a direct correlation, especially to Ron Rivera. And we saw how it kind of affected him at the Chicago press conference after the game. How does that kind of affect the coaches?
Well, I think everyone is aware that, you know, as they lose football games, the intensity, the temperature goes up in the building, right? And I think everyone kind of feels that anytime you go on a skid like this. That was something back in 2013 you mentioned that I remember every day you came in, it was so tough because the mood in the building was so drab. You know, the coaches, you got the sense that they were going to lose their jobs at the end of the year. That meant people were moving. That meant families were moving. And quite frankly, for players, that's also significant because that's the staff that brought you in, right? So if that staff leaves, then it kind of puts you in a weird spot in terms of, is the new staff going to like me? Or am I going to have to find a new team? And all those things kind of start permeating the coaches. And then if it permeates the coaching staff, it kind of trickles down to the players. So I do think that kind of stuff is more impactful on players. But Good coaches are able to keep it together for a long time. Only in 2013 that showed up at the very, very end. That was like I want to say like week 12 or 13, so very near the end of the season, when all that writing was on the wall. And so I think, it's still early for this team. I don't think they're quite there yet, but if they keep losing football games, that's definitely something that you're going to see pop up.
Yeah, and speaking of losing football games, hopefully we'll be able to get somewhere. Carson Wentz. In the offseason, me and you might have discussed, I know I have discussed it with other people, that I always, for some reason, knew that Taylor Heinicke was going to somehow see the field because of an injury of somewhat with Carson Wentz. I don't think he's kind of injury prone, but he always has something going on with him, right?
Sure.
So I always say that Taylor Heinicke is one of the best backups for games. I think the team will rally around him. They love him. He might get at you out 1 or 2 wins. But we're at a point now where it's a losing skid. You have some people calling from Taylor Heinicke just because, right? It's not because they think he's better, but we need to do something different. So,
Sure.
Unfortunately, Carson Wentz fractured his hand in the first half of the game in Chicago before the massive hit. That was the massive block. That was outstanding. But that does show his toughness and his willing to win and want to be successful. But we're here now. Taylor Heinicke is the starter for at least the Green Bay game right now. I don't think the Commanders have put Carson Wentz on injured reserve or anything of that nature yet. I believe he's still in LA after the successful surgery on Monday. So Taylor Heinicke, we know who he is, and we know the weapons shortage that we had last year and what he was able to do, will him to 7 games, to winning 7 games. Logan, what will be the difference in the playbook from Carson Wentz to Taylor Heinicke?
Well, I went back and watched, I don't know, quite a bit of last year's Heinicke's tape. And the thing that stood out to me is I felt like even though last year's offense was simple, it was more nuanced. There was more plays, more concepts being called in that season than they've called thus far this season. And I think, there's really been an emphasis on pushing the football down the field with Carson Wentz. And that kind of lends itself to a very specific style of play calls, right? And I think looking at what Taylor does well, it's kind of those other concepts, those things that help you sustain drives, the quick game stuff, getting the ball out of his hand. He does hold the ball a long time, but he just seemed to have a better feel for what Scott wanted to do. And then I thought back to training camp of this last offseason, and when he's in the game, I know he's going against the twos and he's working with the twos. He just seemed to kind of understand the vision for the offense a little bit more clearly. And I think that's, again, an advantage that he brings. He's been in the offense for 1.5 years, almost 2 years now. And I think that is something that is, quite frankly, invaluable, because it means that he has a clear understanding of the offense. And, I've had conversations with coaches, Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, Bill O'Brien, and they were like, it takes guys about 3 years to be fully comfortable in an offense. So in terms of comparing Carson to Taylor, Taylor's well on the way to that 3 years. He's a third of the way there practically. So I think that's something you'll see. And I think Scott might feel more comfortable getting to more concepts like we just talked about. And also I do think you'll see not a bigger emphasis, because it's been an emphasis the past couple of weeks, but I think you'll see a continued emphasis on them running the football, and trying to alleviate some of that pressure on Heinicke. But I do think you'll see an offense that won't be as challenged on third down because of Taylor's affinity and familiarity with the offense.
And we talk about Scott Turner wanting to go downfield. That was the emphasis on this offseason, be able to bring someone that can be able to really open up this offense to push the ball down the field. But they really haven't been able to do that. Of course, there was a couple plays, I say maybe 5, when they were able to really take deep shots down the field. But with Taylor Heinicke, there has been reports that he has worked on like his strength and different velocity and things of that matter. But I always kind of say, like, it don't matter how many curls you do, it's not gonna like help you throw the ball further, right? And I know people talk about velocity, but can you kind of explain to us, what he could have done in the offseason, what maybe he did done to give him a better deep ball?
So I think a lot of people, when they think throwing mechanics or they think ball velocity, they think like power, they think arm strength, right? Because that's the term you use to describe it, right? But it's really about transferring power, transferring strength from your legs to your arm, which comes from the ground. So that interaction, how wide is my base? How much torque can I get through my hips? I think everyone's familiar with that kind of silly Dak Prescott warm-up exercise where
Yeah.
he's throwing his hip. And basically what he's practicing there is just the power transfer, right? From his legs to his midsection, and then his midsection to his arm. And I think that's the type of stuff you see with Taylor. He's a little bit more efficient with that type of stuff. Now, there's a genetic component to arm strength, right? Not everyone can be Patrick Mahomes and not everyone can be Carson Wentz. But I do think he did look a little bit sharper in that area during training camp and during OTAs. Now that's practice. And even during the preseason game against Kansas City, I thought he did some really good stuff from an arm strength or talent standpoint that we didn't see from him the year before. So, he's never going to be Carson, because Carson's a very unique individual when it comes to throwing the football. Mm-hmm. But he does have I think he's improved in that area. And couple that with his familiarity with the offense, and I think this offense will be in a decent spot. We'll see what happens, obviously, on Sunday, and I'm really excited to check it out. But I think Heinicke could provide some consistency that's been lacking on a down-to-down basis to this offense.
The calendar says that summer is ending soon, but we're still outside. So when it's time to hop in your ride, make sure you book the best mobile detailing service in the DMV, Miles Detailing. Call 240-273-4018 or contact on Instagram at Miles Detailing to book your service today. Mention Red Zone in the Lab podcast for 10% off detail services only. Ride in style with Miles Detailing, that is.
Welcome back to Red Zone in the Lab with Deuce.
And we didn't have a lot of weapons last year. I know Logan had went down. We had Terry. Curtis was down, obviously. He did play in a couple games sporadically, and Taylor did go to him. I watched a few plays from last year, a couple screen quick hitches when he went to Curtis Samuel. Of course, we had JD, who was kind of injured, and then we had Gibson. But with the addition of some of these weapons and everyone being fully healthy, how much would this help Taylor Heinicke?
I mean, I think anytime you have weapons, you see how it affects the quarterback. And I think Green Bay is a perfect example of that. When you look at Green Bay's offense without Adams, it's a shell of itself. Rodgers is not playing like Aaron Rodgers. He's not playing at a super high level. And, obviously the offensive line can play better, but he doesn't have the same skill talent on the outside. They've made a career. He's made a career with Devontae, taking advantage of man-to-man coverage and throwing that fade that everyone's kind of recognizes that relationship for. Mm-hmm. And that just isn't there anymore. And I think having more talented guys around you for Heinicke, I think is just going to lead to better production, because more talented guys can create more separation. They can make contested catches. They can do things at a higher level than non-talented people. And that's just a kind of a fact of life. And you see kind of that impact on a guy like Tua Tagovailoa in Miami with the addition of Tyreek Hill. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something you should see with Taylor. You should see an uptick in production because he's surrounded with better skill talent. Now the question becomes, can the O-line protect him long enough to get the football to those guys? And I think the front for Green Bay is very good, but I got to follow up on this, but I just read something that Rashad Gary's probably out, and he's probably their best pass rusher. Mm-hmm. Preston Smith has not been playing at a super high level. And Clark is, again, he'll play. They're good inside, but not having that big cornerstone edge piece in Gary maybe lends itself to better protection for Heinicke and better distribution of the football to the skill guys.
As far as the game plan, well, let me go back. Which player, like skill position player, we talk about like J.D. McKissick, Curtis Samuels, those guys that are able to kind of hit on the crosses, quick routes, things of that nature. Is there any player in particular that you think of that you have seen that will be like a perfect fit for Taylor Heinicke and how he wants to control the game?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good question. I think when you look at training camp, which is the closest proxy that we have, the guy that had a really fantastic relationship with both Carson and Taylor was Cole Turner. Mm-hmm. And I know that probably is surprising to a lot of people, but Cole really earned that trust with him, and he earned the opportunity to kind of get contested balls. Because one of the things I noticed that Taylor did last year with the group is he was willing to throw contested footballs. And that's where Cole Turner excels. He excels in that area. Another guy that really sticks out to me is Cam Sims. They just seem to have a really nice chemistry together in terms of understanding what the other's looking for on certain routes and understanding where the ball should be. So I think those guys, I know those aren't maybe the names you were expecting necessarily, but I think those guys really developed a strong rapport with Taylor, him and like guys like Armani Rogers, because those are the guys that are working with Taylor during the OTAs, during the offseason. So I think that's a huge thing to keep an eye on is maybe not those top tier guys, but that second tier guy, because those are the twos. Those are the guys that got all the reps with Taylor last year and during the offseason.
And that's what we know. Like I was telling some people when we found out that he's going to get the start or possibly get the start, we got the news about Taylor is that you're not going to worry about Terry not getting targets, right? He's going to make sure he finds a way to throw it in his area, even though it may have to be contested. But
sure,
that's one thing we're not going to have to worry about. And just to kind of wrap it up, what type of game plan do you think Turner is going to come out with Heinicke on Sunday?
Well, I do think that there is they're fortunate in a way because the Packers do run cover 3 and cover 6 quite a bit, which is what the defense here in Washington runs. They also run a little bit of quarters, which is something that Washington doesn't do as much. But having that familiarity, knowing what concepts are good, I think are excellent. You know, I went through the film, watched 4 or 5 games, and there are concepts that Washington runs that were very successful against their cover 3 and quarter. So I would expect to see some of those concepts brought into the game plan. And also I would hope that they kind of find a way to utilize Taylor's legs a little bit. I think he does an excellent job running the football when he's given an opportunity. So why not call a couple zone reads in the game? I'm not saying, 10 or 15, but if you did 3 to 5, that helps you add possessions, helps you get first downs. I think that would be smart. And again, like speak to what he does well, right? He does the RPO stuff very well. He does the zone read stuff very well. And he actually does some good stuff when it comes to deep in cutting routes, which is ironic because that's what this offense is kind of built around, is that deep in cut. So I would expect to see a lot of that on Sunday.
Yeah, because he ran one of those plays for Carson Wentz last in the Chicago game, and Carson kept it. I was like, oh man, he was running so he's running in slow motion. I was like, what is going on here? But yeah, I hope he's able to. And a lot of people kind of bring out the game that Marcus Mariota had on this past Sunday, kind of, comparing those two that Taylor can possibly have, game, like be able to use his legs, kind of slow down that pass rush. What about moving the pocket? I know we talked about that a lot with our bad O-line, just trying to figure out ways to help them, move in the pocket, bootlegs. I think Taylor would be pretty good at that. Because Carson, he just doesn't move how he used to move. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think bootlegs are always great. The problem is that they kind of limit you to reading half the field. I think the half roll stuff is really good, just kind of setting up different targets. Unfortunately, this offense hasn't shown a lot of that over the last 2 years, really since Scott's taken over. So I'd like to say, yes, they'll do something like that. But the history of this offense has shown that they haven't really done that, even in situations where you think they would. I think this offense kind of is what it is at this point. They're going to call what they're going to call. You might just see a little bit expanded profile with Taylor, but it's still going to kind of have the same crux of an offense. And I think, again, you could say that's one of the reasons the offense isn't excelling, is because it's very traditional in its approach. But I think Taylor understands what this offense is, and I think he is in a good spot to execute at a high level.
Last question. Who you think is most excited about Taylor Heinicke coming back, other than Taylor Heinicke, as far as anyone in the building?
I was going to say probably the fans are the most excited.
A change, right? A change.
I don't know if there's anybody who's most excited, but there is a little bit of there's an excitement, man, around the building for him. I think the guys really like him. You mentioned that at the top of the show. They do like him. I think they feel his confidence. I think that's something about him that is always very exciting. Is he's got that, again, everyone makes this comparison, but that Brett Favre gunslinger, kind of like I was like when I was watching his clips last year, like from last year, I was like, man, he does have something to him. He's not the most talented guy in the whole world, but he's very conscious and he puts the football in harm's way, but he's very courageous in terms of taking his opportunities as well. So I think there's just a buzz about the building, that about what you're going to see, because it could be really bad or it could be really good, like Tampa Bay from a couple of years ago, or Green Bay from last year, quite frankly. So I think I expect him to play. I expect him to play well, and I think guys are excited to see him play well.
Yeah, I agree. So you're kind of all over the place, Logan. Just let us know where you are for some people that may not know, because you're not on Twitter. I don't know if you have a burner account,
No,
but you're
no
not.
I've been trying. Everyone keeps telling me I should get on Twitter, and I guess it's getting closer and closer each day, but not yet. And I'll let you know when I get a Twitter. But right now, Instagram, Logan_Paulsen82. I just did a breakdown of Casey Toohill and F.A. Obata with Fred Smoot, which was quite entertaining. Fred is always a good time to be around.
He jumps in.
He
does talk to him about it. He jumps in spaces a lot. He jumps in our spaces a lot on Twitter. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. That's great. Yeah. So he awesome guy. And then obviously the Commanders YouTube page are all our Take Command setters are on there, and all coaches shows are on there. So check that out. Obviously 106.7 The Fan and 980. We do a pregame show with Craig Hoffman, and I do an in-game show with Linnell and Denton Day, who are both kind of young and up and coming talent. So that's a really fun show to check out. And I think that is it on the media side. So yeah, busy, very busy.
Thank you again, Logan. Thank you so much for joining us. Once again, we really appreciate you taking the time. Like I always say, we know your time is very valuable, and for you to spend some with us, we really appreciate it.
Man, I always have a good time on the show. Appreciate you having me.
Thank you so much. This is Red Zone and Lab. We thank you so much for watching. Thank you out there for listening. Please have a safe day. One beat, one sound, one heart, one love.
Thank you for listening to Red Zone in the Lab podcast. Please follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at Red Zone in the Lab. And you can download our podcast at Spotify, iTunes, and Podbean. And please visit our website at redzoneinTheLab.com. Thank you.